All right, sorry for the delay, everybody. I was having trouble getting on here, so we're good to go now. We'll go ahead and get started. If you have your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video. If you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video. If you are on a larger screen, like a desktop, let me refresh this. See if there's any new questions in there. All right, so there's no questions in there at the moment. So if you got questions, go ahead and post them, and we'll get answering. Looks like everything that's in there right now has been answered already yesterday. So all right, so looks like we got one from Blue Note. So Blue Note says, in my downline video, my head stays steady, horizontal and vertical. Going back looks great. As I transition in the downline video, my head noticeably moves left. I'm a righty. It is possible this is due to a lot of early over rotation of the shoulders. For it to be early extension, does this incorrect move need to be at or near impact versus on transition? Could the correct diagnosis be early shoulder rotation? It's hard to say exactly without seeing, but early extension is a hip movement. Now that can definitely make your head move, right? Usually, if my hips move that way, my head will move back that way, which you're saying if you're looking from down the line, you're right-handed, that would be moving left, right? So early extension can cause that, but I can also early extend and not move my head, right? So extension is just this from my hips. It's basically just making the angle between my legs and my spine or my back, making that angle smaller. So if I extend my hips forward, right, I can do that without looking silly here. I can do that without moving my head. So it's not necessarily, necessarily what's going on there. I'd also say it's not necessarily a swing fault. What we have to understand is, I think people get a little bit too much into, hitting specific, trying to hit pictures, right? Golf is a target game, right? So we need to look at what are the ball flight contact issues, and then what could be the issues that are going on with your swing, because we don't want to just look at your head and then say, oh, your head's moving back, we got to fix that, because you may work on that for months to get it fixed, but then what do you have to show for it, right? Yeah, the head that's more still, but are you any better at golf for doing that? It's hard to say. If you don't link it to a specific ball flight contact issue, then it doesn't really, you have to connect it to something, and that way you can see. So the best way to improve, or the fastest way to improve in golf, if your goal is just to make your golf swing look a certain way, and you don't care if you play good or bad, then sure, okay. What you can do is you can do a drill where you're up against a wall and you have your head on the wall, and you keep your head on the wall all the way through, and you just train that until you're blue in the face, basically, right? But if your goal is to play better golf, lower your handicap, shoot lower scores, right, then I would look at what are your ball flight contact issues, and then I would look at, okay, well, what are you doing in your swing that's causing those ball flight contact issues? So that's what I would kind of be looking at. So Brandon D says, I have developed a case of gluteus medius tendonitis, probably from golf. Um, Golf continues to irritate my condition after over 6 months of rehab. Do you have any suggestions concerning taking back up the game? Um, I have to say this, man, this is tough. It's not really my expertise. I don't even know what gluteus medius is. Um, but tendonitis is just an over, is doing something too much, right? Too much, too fast, right? That's really what it is. So, um, I don't know if that's something that, basically what you need for tendonitis is you need rest. You need to rest it, and um, if it's chronic, meaning I think it's called something else if it's actually chronic, like tendinosis or something like that. If it's actually a chronic issue, which I mean that's tough. If you have chronic pain and issues all the time, you either have to kind of not do something or kind of deal with the pain. Again, not my expertise though. A doctor may say something else. That's just my understanding of it. So Brandon, I wish I could help, but I don't really know what exactly gluteus medius is. So I don't really know. Your doctor is going to be the one that's going to be able to help you the most, or a medical professional of some sort. So Roro says, I sure hope you can understand what I'm asking for. I would like you to do a slow swing and for you to describe what you are looking for. Do backswing first, then downswing, where you want your body to be different positions in the swing. You got to be more specific than that. I'm not necessarily, thinking about a certain thing, and everybody's different. So what may help me may not help you. Do you have a specific question? Like, why are you? My question might be, why are you asking this question? What are you hoping to get out of it? That's what I would kind of want to know. The impact position is definitely different than the address position, right? Address, when we look at the better players, address, typically everything's going to be pretty squared up, right? My knees, my hips, my shoulders, everything's going to be pretty squared up. When I come to impact, I'm going to be, and also my balance is going to be pretty balanced here. I'm going to be pretty balanced on both of my feet. At impact, I'm going to have more weight over here. I'm going to be more on my lead side. I'm going to be pushed a little bit forward toward the target. My body is going to be a little bit more open, right? My lead arm, my chest is going to be open. My lead arm is going to be straighter. My trail arm is going to have some bend in it. My trail wrist is going to have some bend back into it. I'm going to have my trail heel typically off of the ground a little bit, right? My body's going to be a little more. So here's address. There's impact. Address, impact. That's what it is. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, I don't know what exactly you're what you're trying to ask. It's too broad. If you want me to understand, what you're looking for, I would ask a more specific question. I'm wanting to see where the club is at certain places in the swing. So what are those places? Be specific. And the other thing is that it's not necessarily the same for everybody. People have different swings. It's not necessarily going to be the same. There may be some things that are similar. And also, there's lots of slow motion video available on YouTube or anywhere, right? You could basically the way that I a lot of times if I'm curious about something, I'll go to YouTube and just look at a video of a tour player, and see, okay, well, does this tour player do that? Does that tour player do that? There's lots of that out there. So that may be something you want to look at. But if you want like a specific position, like I'll be happy to show you. So Tom P says, when trying to get your swing path more out to the right, is it better to have your shoulders lead and pull the arms through the turn, uh, or to have your arms turn first and pull the rest of the body through? And when does the external rotation of your trail arm occur, on the downswing, or is it starting by the top of the backswing? Yeah. So first of all, it should all happen from the ground up, right? So pushing into the ground, knees, hips, chest, shoulders, arms, hands, club, right? That's the way that it works. So it'd be shoulders and then arms. We don't want to put the arms in front, right? Because if we're here and then we throw the arms in front, look what happens. We need to be here, and then the shoulders are going, and then the arms are going. That's kind of the sequence of what's happening there. As far as the external rotation in our trail arm, our trail shoulder, it's actually this joint here that we're going to have external rotation. So you can think of that as losing an arm wrestling contest. Well, that's typically going to be gradually happening as we go up to the top of the swing. So as I go up to the top of the swing, I'm gradually losing an arm wrestling contest. And then when I start my downswing, I want to continue to lose the arm wrestling contest. So it's kind of gradually, slowly happening as I get to the top. And then when I start my downswing, I want it to continue happening. What I don't want to do is I don't want to get up here. I don't want to max out my arm wrestling move, right? My losing arm wrestling move. Because if I do that to the top of the swing, if I max that out, then the only thing I can really do is do the winning the arm wrestling move. And that would look like this. If I max it out, then I'm going to go like that. So I don't want to have it totally maxed out. I want to be here. It's gradually moving into external rotation, right? And then that way I can continue to work it into external rotation when I'm starting down. So it's a gradual as we go up to the top, and then it continues as we start down. So Roro says, I am pulling my irons. Should I let my body carry the arms to the swing? You might have answered my question just now. Yeah. So if you're pulling your irons, what's happening is you're coming down steep, right? So a pull is caused by, and just to define what a pull is, or what I would define it, just to make sure that we're on the same page, because sometimes people call overdraws pulls. The net result may be the same, but the ball flight's very different, right? So a pull for a right-handed golfer would be a shot that starts left and then it just goes straight left. It doesn't have a lot of curvature on it. It's a straight shot. It just goes left, right, for a right-handed golfer. So what causes that is a steep swing where we're coming down a little bit steep. We're coming down a little bit over the top, right? And then my club face is in the same direction that my club's moving. So if I have my alignment stick on the ground here, you can think of my ball, or my club, excuse me, my club working from outside that stick, hitting the ball, then inside the stick, right? So my club's working to the left through contact, and then my club face is in that same direction. That's going to produce a pull. So what we need to do is the exact opposite. We need to feel like this club is working from very much inside the stick to outside the stick. That's what needs to happen. And a very easy way to do this would be to just put an obstacle in your way. Force yourself to swing from the inside. This is what we do in the 20-minute shallowing fix course. You know, it's one thing to try to swing from the inside, you know, but a lot of people try things and they try as much as they can, but they just can't do it. Right? It's not that they can't do it, it's just that they can't do it without some other means to help them to be able to do it. Right? So if you're one of those people that just swinging to the right doesn't produce in a swing that actually goes to the right, then what we need to do is put something in the way, right? So one thing you can use is a box from some balls, right? And I just place this, you know, behind to the right of your ball and then behind your ball a little bit. And now, if you look there, if I swing above, if I bring that club in that same motion, I'm going to smack that box. So now I have to hit this ball with being able to miss that box. So you can see I have to swing to the inside of the stick and then outside the stick to be able to do that, right? So that's what I would be working on. And this may be really difficult to do at full speed, you know, so maybe beneficial to slow down at first, get used to and get comfortable with the movement, then speed it up. You may want to shorten, do it in kind of a half swing. You know, get to where you can do it in a swing where you're like this, right? One other thing is that some people, you know, feel like it's in the way of their backswing, so they don't want to put it there. Very, very easy way to get around that. Set up to the ball, just put it already behind it so it's not in the way, and then start your swing from there, right? So that's, you know, that would be a way to get rid of your pull. And I would actually try to push the ball. You know, the best way to get rid of any issue is to exaggerate the opposite of the issue. So what I would try to do is I'd actually try to push the ball way out to the right, hit a big push, and then just ease off of it. That's going to help you to get there a lot faster. All right, so let's keep going. So Jan's case says, along the same line, I have limited external rotation of the trail shoulder. I imagine this leads to more of a fade with out to in swing. How should I change to get more shallow if I might not be able to physically? Yeah, so we don't need a ton of external rotation in the shoulder, right? It doesn't take a ton. The other things that shallow out the club are forearm rotation, right? So if I'm here and I just rotate my forearms, right? So I can pin my elbow to my side, right? And then rotate my forearm, look, the club is shallow, right? So I can be here and rotate my forearms, and that shallows out the club. So that'd be one. Another is our wrist angles, right? So if I'm here and I extend my trail wrist back, you can see how that also shallows out the club. So I can actually have, you know, maybe some extra rotation here, and then I can shallow out my club still. It's not ideal, but I can still shallow out the club from that. But the good thing is that we don't need a ton of external rotation in our shoulder to shallow out the club. It doesn't require you to be able to bring your arm all the way back, right? It's not as much as what you think. It's really, you know, most people should be able to get that in there. You know, there could be, you know, if there's a limitation as in like you can't externally rotate at all, it may be difficult. It may be a situation where you may need to kind of close off your body, right? Because you're just going to be kind of coming down steep, and you're just going to have a steep swing, and you're going to pull everything. You're just going to set up to pull everything, basically. And that's 100% fine if that's what you need to do. But it doesn't typically take as much external rotation as what some people might think. Ideally, if you could do a lot, you know, that'd be great. You know, you could be like Dustin Johnson or something like that. But you know, if you can't do a ton, which I don't have, you know, Clay's pretty limited in his external rotation. So, you know, you can do a test where basically you stand up like this, and then you just kind of rotate it back, right? If you can get it to match your spine, that's pretty normal. Whereas Clay, Clay can only go to about right there, somewhere in that area, and you can see he shallows out the club awesome, right? So it doesn't take a ton, uh, a ton of external rotation to be able to do that. Now, if you're someone who can only go like that, that might be there may be an issue with your shoulder for sure. Um, but yeah, you may be very limited, and you may need to kind of come down steep if that's the case, because you may not be physically capable of shallowing out the club away. Most players do. And if that's the case, I would just aim right and just pull everything. All right, let's keep going. So Carrie T says, should backswing and follow through in greenside bunker be same as wedge swing from grass lie, or should arms be shorter backswing and follow through like a T-Rex arm swing and both elbows tucked? Yeah, so if we're hitting out of a bunker, you're going to tend to release it a little bit earlier, right? If you're hitting like a pitch shot out of grass, you're typically going to have some shaft lean, right? It's going to be more, depending on how long the shot is. If it's a shorter shot, right? If it's a kind of a shorter kind of around the greens kind of shot, it may be kind of like that, right? What you're talking about, where you're keeping your elbows kind of close together and letting the club kind of release, right? It may be kind of like that if you're trying to hit kind of a high one like that. Out of the bunker, right? You're gonna have the face open, and you may kind of release it, right? You may come through like that. So yeah, you can, you want to make sure that you're coming through with some power through there. But yeah, it's typically going to be kind of you're kind of trying to keep the face open. Generally with a, you're not trying to compress a bunker shot, right? You're trying to hit the sand and trying to get the sand to shoot the ball out of the bunker, right? So with that, you're going to try to keep loft on the face, so that way you can have the bounce. You're going to try to basically throw this club, if you're thinking about this kind of slow motion, you're trying to kind of throw the club underneath. It's going to be more like that. Whereas if I'm trying to hit like a normal pitch shot, especially if I'm maybe trying to drive one in low, right, for a longer one, I may be coming in, I may have some shaft lean here, and I'd be maybe coming in more like that. If I'm trying to hit a higher one, I may release it a little bit and have my arms in closer. Generally, that's for closer chips. But I'd be really trying to get that club to work underneath the golf ball, glide through the sand, so that way the sand can bring it out. So Billy W says, do you have any tips on green reading? I have trouble feeling the slope, which way the ball will break. Thanks. Yeah. So what I would try to do is try to get behind those. One thing that I see a lot of people do when they're trying to read greens is basically the ball will be right here, and then they'll get right here and they'll bend down and try to look at it, right? What I would try to do is I would get behind it 10, 20 feet, so that way you can kind of see the slope a lot better, right? If you're just standing right behind the ball and trying to see the slope, you're just not going to be able to see it as much. So that's what I would try to do is get behind it farther, so that way you can see the slope. The other thing would be getting better at feeling it in your feet, right? Now, some people are going to be better at this than others, but this is one way that I really like to kind of feel and read greens. I like to look at it to get a general idea. Okay, it definitely looks like it's doing this, and then I'm going to use a different sense to kind of sense. So what I'll do is, let's say that if this is the if this is the hole right here, what I'll do, I'll get behind it, 10, 20 feet to kind of see, so I can try to see the overall slope. What I'll also do is I'll walk around it. So I'll get right here and I'll kind of walk around it to kind of feel. I'm going to be feeling where the slope is, right? Is it right to left? Is it left to right? Is it uphill? Is it downhill? And also, when I walk around the hole, what I'm also going to be looking at is the grain, right? I'm going to be looking at where the grain is at the hole. So, the reason why that may be important is if the grain is working away from you and you have a downhill putt, it may be really fast. If you have grains working into you and you have a downhill putt, it may still be fast, but may not be as fast, right? If you have an uphill putt and it's into the grain, it may be crazy slow. It may be something you have to hit really hard. If it's a left or right putt and the grain's kind of going in that direction, it may break a little bit more. In the opposite, if it's a left or right putt and the grain's going in the opposite direction, it may not break as much as what you think. So these are all things you got to kind of learn by doing. But that's one thing I definitely look at. So basically, I've taken everything in, right? I've taken everything in. I've looked at the slope. I've got a general idea there. I've walked around. I've seen the grain. And now with all that information, and wind may play, if it's really windy, that may play a role depending on how fast your greens are, right? If it's really, really windy, that may play a role. But basically, I'm just taking in all the information that I have at my disposal. And then at that point, I'm going to, basically play a movie in my mind of which I think, what I think is going to happen. And then I'm going to commit to that. And sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you're dead right. Sometimes you're way off, right? Sometimes you're right and you just don't execute it really well, right? Maybe you hit it way too hard or you hit it way too soft or something like that. So, that's, or maybe you just hit it offline, right? It's not always a bad read. It may also just be poor execution. So that's really what it is. One thing you can do as well is try to find where the dead straight putt is, right? So if I know, okay, this is dead flat over here, then I know, let's say that this is, from over here, let's say that this putt is dead straight and it's uphill, right? Well, then I know that this putt here is going to break from left to right. I know that it is. And the further I am away from that putt, the more it's going to break. The more slope there is, the more it's going to break. So that's what I try to do is I just practice it. It's something you got to practice. It's not something you're just going to come out of nowhere and be really good at it. You just be mindful of all these things. Look at the slope, practice assigning, what you think is going to happen with that slope. Walk around, practice and then the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And the other thing to keep in mind too is, some people think they should just be able to go to any golf course and greens you never played before and just be able to read them really well. That's the toughest scenario. Greens you don't know are the toughest to read. And I wouldn't expect to read, if I go somewhere for the first time and play, I don't expect to be able to read the greens perfectly because I've never played them before. If you play a course that you play quite often, you kind of know all the little slopes of the green. You get to know everything. You know that, hey, I know that this one over here, it looks like it breaks a lot, but it really doesn't, or the opposite, right? Or this one here, it's really fast, even though it seems kind of flat or something like that. You tend to learn the more local rules. So just pay attention to those things when you're going through. So it's really just about being mindful. And there's no magic trick that I can give you to do this. It's really just you look at it. What does it look like? Right? Does it look like it breaks that way? Does it look like it breaks that way? Look at the slope. Right? Feel it in your feet. Does it feel? If it doesn't feel like anything, then don't play any break. Right? If it feels pretty flat, because that's the other thing. Don't talk yourself into. I think that's another thing that I see people do is they talk themselves. It's like it has to break. All putts break. It has to break. No, not all putts break. Some putts are just straight. If you don't feel any break, you don't see any break, don't play any. Just hit it right at it. Just see the ball going right dead center in the hole, dead straight. If it breaks, then it breaks, and you learn from that, right? But don't try to talk yourself into something that's not there as well. All right, let's keep going. So Ronan Q says, I tend to pick the ball clean, never take a divot. I'm only starting out in the TSG system. Although I have watched quite a few videos on the site, my question is, should I ever try and take a divot consciously, or will that take care of itself when I get more forward shaft lean and a shallower plane? In my head, I have always fearful a divot will be a fat shot. Any particular lessons to watch? Yeah. So if you're not taking a divot, I mean, you should be. You're not necessarily. You're trying to hit the ball solidly, right? So a divot is kind of a product of that. You're not necessarily just trying to take a divot. You're trying to hit the ball solidly, and if you're hitting the ball solidly, generally you're usually going to be taking a divot because that means that your low point is going to be in front of the golf ball. So if you're not taking a divot, basically what's happening is the low point of your swing arc is occurring at or maybe even before the golf ball, right? So the club works around in a circle, right? So you can think of this as how the club is working around. So the bottom of this circle, if you're just picking the ball off the turf, the bottom of that circle is happening at your golf ball. What we want, if you want to be a good ball striker, is the bottom of that circle needs to be a little bit in front of and a little bit below your ball. So it needs to be there, right? So if my fist is the golf ball, my low points can be a little bit in front of and a little bit below the golf ball. That's going to allow me to consistently make ball, then turf contact and hit the ball more solidly. If my you can get away with this, you can definitely hit solid shots doing this, but it's not going to be very consistent, right? Because it has to be, there's no margin for error. If your low point of the swing is happening right at the golf ball, your best case scenario is that you're going to pick it, right? Because your depth you can't get your depth low enough, because if you do, you're going to chunk it, right? And that's why you feel like you're going to chunk it, because your low point's probably right here. It may even be before the golf ball, right? And if my depth, if my low point doesn't get down at all, then I'm going to really thin it or maybe even top it, right? So I need it to be down and forward, so that way I have a higher margin for error, right? So as far as if you're looking for, the top-speed golf system in and of itself is going to help you to be able to do that. If our spine angles are off, we'll tend to have trouble with that. So the stable fluid spine. If we're not getting a good shoulder turn and we're throwing out the club early as a way to create power, that can also be an issue. If we're casting the club, that can tend to make the club bottom out early. If we're casting the club in the start of the swing, if our compression line's too far angled away, that'll affect the low point of the swing, right? So the top-speed golf system in and of itself, would be a good thing to work through. But if you're looking for more, that's more of a long-term, plan to work through your swing. If you're looking for more dedicated to, okay, I want to start making divots, I'd recommend checking out our stop topping and chunking course. Now, I know you're not necessarily topping or chunking it, but those are all really related to each other. They're related to low point control. So that course directly works on low point control. So that's why I'd recommend you go check out. To get to the stop topping and chunking course, click the house icon that will take you to the home page. Then if you scroll down the home page, you'll see a list of all the courses there. Select that course and get started on those drills, and you can start taking some divots. All right, so Dick P says, when you shallow the club, is this the shifting of the plane on the downswing that Ben Hogan talked about? So I'm not sure exactly what Ben Hogan talked about with the shifting of the plane, but really all you're doing is getting the club just under the plane, so that way it can kick out onto the plane, right? So if you think about it this way, if I'm shallowing out that club, I have my club just working underneath that plane, and then when it gets to the golf ball, it will actually kick out toward the ball, and that helps you get you a little bit more juice and allows you to be a little bit more consistent. If we're above, right, if we're above that plane coming down, then we're not going to get that club to kick out, and then our club's also going to be, off plane. It's typically going to be slower, right? So we want it to be shallowed out so that way it can kick out and allow you to be more consistent. So Bob B says, Q, regarding release of the wrist, hands, club, do you have a special out front target in your mind's eye about when to release? 2 feet after the ball, greens, flag, sky, question mark. So this is actually something that we talk about. This is one of the drills in the straight line release course. It's basically just a spot that's about 4 feet in front of the golf ball. That's generally, if you have your ball here, and if I put another ball that's about 4 feet in front, right? So that's probably about 4 feet. I'm feeling like oops, sorry, you probably can't see those balls. Let me move these. I didn't realize you couldn't see them. Sorry about that. So this is the ball that I'm trying to hit. There's the ball that I'd be trying to maybe have a sense that I'm releasing to, right? So I'm here, I hit the ball, and then I'm releasing to that ball, right? So that would be about 45 degrees out in front, like we talked about in the toss speed golf system. That's one of the drills that we do in there. Now, what I will say regarding that, golf is a game of adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want, right? So if you feel like you're releasing there and you are releasing there, then great. But if not, then if you're releasing it earlier, even though you feel like you're releasing it there, you may need to feel like you're releasing it toward the flag. You may need to feel like you're not releasing it at all to get it to release where you want to. So, that's why I'm saying golf is a game of adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. So keep that in mind. But literally, it's going to be a point that's about 4 feet in front of the ball is where it would be a good spot to release it. And a lot of that depends on, the ball flight too. If you're wanting to hit it lower, you may want to feel a point that's 5-6 feet in front. If you want to hit it a little bit higher, then you may, if you want to launch it a little bit higher, then you may want to think of a point that's 2 or 3 feet in front of the ball, because that's going to release the club a little bit more and add a little bit more loft. But generally, what you're going to see tour players is it's going to be releasing, about 4 feet in front. All right, so we have a question from guest. What is a good feel for the arms to shallow the club from the top of the backswing? So a couple things here are, one, feel is relative. So, what you need to feel, what I need to feel, there's no one feel that's going to make everybody shallow out the club. So what I'd recommend doing is working through our 20-minute shallowing fix course. And there's some great things that are talked about in there. But what's happening is, we talked about this a little bit. Our trail shoulder is externally rotating. So the losing of an arm wrestling contest, that could be a good feel, right? Our lead arm is internally rotating, right? So you can think of that as winning an arm wrestling contest. So if I do that with my elbows, right? If I do that with my elbows, look what happens. The club shallows. So that would be one. Another would be a turning of the doorknob, right? So if I have my arms pinned to my body and I turn the doorknob, right? So that'd be right forearm would be supination, and then trail forearm would be pronation. So pronation, inward rotation, supination, outward rotation, right? If I do that, that shallows out the club, right? So that could be another feel, a turning of the doorknob to the right for a right-handed golfer. Another thing could be wrist angles, right? So that'd be flexion of the flexion of the lead wrist, extension of the trail wrist. You can think of that as bowing of the lead wrist and knuckles back of the trail wrist. If I do that, that also shallows out the club. So those things together all shallow out the club. You could think of one thing that makes you do all of those things. So one thing could be to try to get the club head underneath your hands. Right? To get here, club head underneath hands. That's extreme, but that could be a feel, an exaggerated feel to help you. If you're someone who's doing this, feeling this may get you to be more here, right? So that's why I'm saying golf is a game of adjusting your feel. So I would play around with feels with your arms and your hands that help you to do that. You have to look at what is the thing that's missing that's not allowing you to shallow out the club. It may not necessarily be something you're doing with your arms or your hands. It could be you're not turning your body. If I don't turn my body, I'm going to have a hard time shallowing out this club. If I turn my body, well, now this club can more easily shallow in the downswing. So if you don't turn your body, that could be part of it. If you don't really if you get your hands you don't turn and you kind of get your hands too high, right? That can make it difficult to shallow. So we want to get our hands, basically going up and across above our chest there instead of just going straight up. We want to get some depth to our hands. That can make it easier for you to shallow. So it may be you need to feel more of this instead of this, right? It's hard to say without seeing your swing what exactly you need to do, but those would be the things that I'd be looking at. Typically the best that feels are the things that make you do all the things that you need to do. So really, if you just put obstacle down, put something down, put it in your way, right? And just say, okay, I need to hit this golf ball without hitting that box, right? If you do that, you'll shallow out the club. Now, you may not shallow it when you want to shallow. You may end up shallowing it late, but you will shallow out the club. If you hit this golf ball without hitting that box, you have to shallow out the club at some point in the swing, right? So that's where I would at least start with it. If you're having trouble, I would start there, and then just go as slow as you have to go to be able to do it. And then, or you maybe even shorten your swing to be able to do it, just depending on, what's easier for you. And then you build up from there. All right. So Ronan says, thank you, Quentin. That makes total sense. No problem. All right, we got, 20 minutes or so left. Keep the questions coming. I do have to go right at noon. So make sure we get our questions in. All right, so Will B says, trying to understand the hip body rotation relative to hand position in the downswing. All right, what don't you understand? And I'll be happy to help. So D says, I like the idea of putting the box on the ground to support shallowing, but won't the box be in the way of a proper backswing? Good question. You may have missed when I talked about this earlier, but you're exactly right. For some people, that may be in the way. So the trick to that would be just to start out when you're doing this drill, right? If I have this behind, right? If I have that there, would be just to start with the club behind it. So if I'm doing this drill, I'm going to address the ball. I'm going to start with the club just behind it, and then I'll start my backswing and then make sure I'm coming in from the inside. So that'd be kind of a trick. And then once you're able to do that, then you take away the box and try to do the same thing. Kind of try to pretend like the box is still there. So Guest says, one follow-up, is the first move down with the hands from the top of the backswing? No, it's usually the first move down is going to be pressure in the lead foot. Start from the ground up. Pressure lead foot, body, hips, chest, shoulders, arms, hands, club. That's basically the sequence of where it wants to go. If you go hands down first, a lot of times you're going to tend to cast the club. You're going to tend to early release, flip through contact. You're going to tend to come over the top if you're upper body, hands first. So yeah, I would ground up is kind of what you want to feel like. You're also going to tend to chunk shots because if you're not pressuring lead foot first, you're typically going to be starting down with the hands and you're going to still be on your back foot. So we want to be pressure here. We're pushing, everything's opening up, and then the hands are going. You almost want to feel like your hands are staying up, right? They're not going to be staying up because your body is going to be rotating, right? But if I'm here and I rotate my body down, my hands move down, but I'm still keeping my hands up. I'm not doing anything like this. My hands are still staying up. My lead arm is still staying above my pec and pinned to it as I'm starting down. That's what I would try to feel like if you're someone who's kind of pulling down on it. All right, so Will B says, at impact, ideally, how open are your hips and what is the impact of having them more closed or open? Yeah, so good question. So generally, what we're going to see in most tour players, most better players, is the hips are going to be roughly about 40 to 50 degrees open at impact. And basically, what it means is that we're keeping the body rotating through impact, right? So if my hips are closed, then that means that my body is stalling, right? It's not continuing to rotate. It's either stalling or decelerating. And if I'm decelerating or stalling, then the club has to get to the ball in some way, which will usually involve early releasing the club. That's why when you typically see people whose hips are square to the ball at impact, they're typically going to have an early release because the body is stalled, which means everything's going to keep releasing. So if you think about it this way, if you took a fan and then you tied a ribbon to the tip of the fan blades and then you turned it on, right? As long as that's at a constant speed or it's accelerating, that ribbon is just going to go around in a circle, and it's just going to keep lagging behind. It's going to keep going around in a circle. But if you turn the fan off or you decelerate, then that ribbon's going to flip forward, right? If I take my arm and I swing it like this, right, and then I stop my arm, what's the club going to do? It's going to do that. So it's the same thing kind of happens in the golf swing. If I'm here, I stall my body, I'm going to flip my hands through. If I want to keep this club lagging behind and get shaftly and release it out in front, I have to keep my body rotating because I have to keep this club. You're going to be decelerating no matter what, right? Because we can't keep moving around in a circle because we have end ranges of motion, right? So we're going to reach our end ranges of motion. So we're going to be decelerating. So the club is going to be releasing, right? But to keep it from releasing too early, we want to try to keep things moving as much as we can. That's why I'm saying try to keep your arm pinned to your chest, try to keep your hands and everything back as long as you can, and then keep rotating your body through, because that's going to help you to rotate through the shot. That's going to help to keep the club lagging behind. If I'm here and then I stop my body, the club's got to flip. So that's the negative effect of it, is that you're typically going to early release the club, which means your face is going to be less stable because you're going to have to go from open to closed very quickly. You're not going to be able to have that club face in more of a closed position, because if you flip with that closed position, you're just going to hit it way left, right? We have to keep the body rotating through to keep that club face square. So those would be kind of the downsides to it. So Dick P says, how long should you keep the shoulders more closed before rotating on the downswing? I mean, they should be, the way I would think about the rotation of the shoulders is that they're rotating on the same plane. It's not technically the same plane, but it should be pretty close, right? So in the backswing, I'm going to have my shoulders there, and then the downswing, I'm going to have my shoulders there. So it's kind of rotating on the same plane. Typically, the shoulders are going to be a little bit steeper in the downswing, but most people just have trouble keeping them on the same plane. So, I would just try to feel like you're always keeping them pretty steep to be able to stay in your posture, right? So your shoulders aren't holding back, and then everything's going through. You go up to the top, and then everything's coming down. As soon as you start pushing into the ground, everything starts rotating, and your shoulders are coming with it, your arms are coming with it, right? Everything's coming with it. So as soon as you start the downswing, those shoulders should be moving down with, basically being pulled down by the by the rotation of the shoulders and everything. All right, so let's keep going. So D says, there's been talk over the years about 1 and 2 plane swings. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what TSG promotes is basically a 2 plane. So my question is, can a golfer have 1 plane swing that automatically makes the downswing shallow? So I'm not sure why people think that the top speed golf system promotes a 2 plane swing. It doesn't promote any sort of plane swing. You can swing on whatever planes you want in the top speed golf system. Probably the most famous in the whole reason why anyone even thinks about one plane swings is Mo Norman, right? There's people that really teach like kind of Mo Norman style of swing. Mo Norman is nailing the Tatsumi system. He is doing all of it. He has stable fluid spine. He has a good turn. He has lag. He has a good compression line, and he releases the club out in front. He shallows the club. He does all of those things, right? So it's not that Tatsumi golf promotes any two plane or even one plane. You can swing on whatever plane you want, and the Tatsumi golf system supports one plane or two plane. So I get questions like that all the time. I wonder why. I'm not really sure why people think or members think that the Tatsumi golf system is a two plane swing. We literally don't talk about any one or two plane in the Tatsumi golf system. So that confuses me sometimes. So it's any plane. Now, swinging on one plane, does that automatically make the downswing shallow? I wouldn't say so. Swinging on one plane is really just getting the club to work up and down the same plane, right? If you look at Mo Norman's swing, he is shallowing it slightly, right? It's not technically one plane. All swings are really multiple planes. You can't really keep the club on the same exact plane, and you wouldn't want to. That wouldn't actually be the best way to swing the club. You want to get that kick out, and that's what Mo is doing too. And anyone who claims to swing on one plane, that's what they're doing too. So, yeah, there's nothing that's going to automatically necessarily make the downswing shallow. It either is or it isn't, right? And if it isn't, then you need to work. So I guess if you're swinging the club naturally and you're not even have to thinking about it, and then it's shallow, then you're basically automatically shallowing it, right? Whereas if you are not coming down shallow, right, then you're going to need to change something to do that, and then you're going to have to do that with enough repetition to get to where it's automatically shallow, right? So Larry K says, I've been using a stronger grip, but gradually my driver shots have progressed left until I'm now left drawing left. I've suffered from early release and flipping in the past. I've weakened the grip to neutral to straighten ball flight, losing some distance, thinking I could go through the 20-minute shallowing course again. Other suggestions? Yeah, you probably started coming down steep again. So I would go back through the 20-minute shallowing fix to get to where you can get the ball to start to the right and curve to the left. Dick P says, what do you mean by kick out? Yeah, so basically this club is always going to want to line up with the direction that it's being pulled, right? So when I get here, right, and I pull on this club up and around my body, my club's going to kick out to the ball, right? Whereas if the club's here and I pull this club that way, it's not kicking out. It's just kind of lining up, and you're going to cut across the ball. So if I have it if I have it shallow, and let's say at club parallel to the ground, I have this club kind of pointing out to the right, and then I pull this club around my body to the left at this point, right? Then the club's going to kick out. And you're going to get that little extra, speed from doing that, and also control, right? If you have the club here, you're not going to have as much control of it when it's steep, and also you're cutting across it. So Will B says, as you take a stronger grip, do you need less wrist movement through impact? Yeah. So typically, the stronger your grip is, the less roll you're going to have through impact. Not necessarily, but generally. Right? If I have a really weak grip, I'm going to tend to have this face kind of open, and I'm going to need to kind of flip, release it. The other option would be to kind of really bow my lead wrist and kind of hold that through. If I have a stronger grip, I'm not going to need to roll my hands over as much, right? I'm going to be able to keep my hands, if I were to flip my hands over, I'd hit it way left. So if I have a stronger grip, that face is going to be more square generally, and I'm going to be able to turn through it and keep that face square. There's going to be less rolling over. It's going to be more, kind of keeping that face square through contact. All right, we got time for maybe one more. I do have to go right at noon. I think I missed a question right before the last one. Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry about that. So D says, I think it's because you go back on one place, but once you shallow it, it creates another plane, doesn't it, by virtue of the fact that you shallowed it, which is different than the plane you were on in the backswing? Or am I thinking this all wrong? So basically, the backswing plane doesn't really matter that much. It only matters how the club comes down into the ball. So that's why the one plane thing, it's 100% fine. If you bring it back on a similar plane to what you bring it down, then if that helps you to bring it down on the correct plane, then that's great. But if it doesn't, then you should probably do something else, which is why you don't see most tour players swing one plane. It's because it's hard to get it to go up the exact one as it comes down. Generally, it's for most players, it's going to be generally easier for them to bring it up a little bit more steeply and then bring it down a little bit more shallow. That's just because the everything's working in that direction, right? If I bring it back on the same plane, it can be, a lot of times when I see people try to do the one plane swing, they just come down steep in the downswing. They might feel like they're doing a one plane swing, but the reality is that they're doing two plane, and not the two planes you want, right? They're going up kind of shallow or neutral, and then coming down steep. But if you bring it back, pretty neutral, and then you slightly shallow it out or keep it pretty neutral in the downswing, that's great. If that's something that's easy for you to do, but it's not something that I would try to perfect and try to get my backswing to look a certain way. I'd be more focused on what my downswing is doing, because that's what you hit the ball with. You hit the ball with the downswing, right? So we want to get the downswing plane, and whatever backswing plane you take to get the downswing plane where it needs to be, that's the one you should use. All right. So go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. I got to go. We'll talk to y'all next time.